Dominic Grieve, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. I really appreciate it. Has this been a painful experience for you at party conference? You've been jettisoned from the party, you've lost the whip. How's your experience been?
Been perhaps rather less painful than I might have anticipated. I wasn't quite sure what would happen when I came. I had the fringes to do, and I decided I would come for part of the conference. And I don't regret it. I think that the reception from some Conservative members who are attending has been warmer than I might have anticipated, and indeed quite a few people encouraging me in what I'm doing, which I think shows quite a high level of disquiet with the direction in which the party is going. And those people who have disagreed with me or come up to talk to me to disagree with me have done it for the most part in a very polite fashion, even though they've expressed their views perfectly forcefully, as I would expect. There's been very little abuse, most of it rather typically sort of abuse behind your back. So as you're walking around, somebody's saying, "Shameful to see him here." And I don't really take that very seriously when that happens.
Your speech earlier, you mentioned that you were totally opposed. You do everything in your power to stop the UK leaving the European Union without a deal on October the 31st. What measures, what path do you see that taking over the next month or so?
I hope we've taken the necessary measures. I hope that the Ben Act, as it's called, I would call it the Safeguarding Act, not the Surrender Act. In fact, I think the Safeguarding Act is a good way to describe it, is, I think, fit for purpose. Obviously, I'm always alive to the fact that people may look for loopholes, and we will have to be vigilant about that. But I think it is the right means of making sure that we extend if we don't get a deal which is approved by Parliament. And I think that's what we have got to do. Obviously, some people are worried and think that perhaps we need to take more radical measures. I think that would be a mistake unless we absolutely can't avoid it. And I don't think that we need to be seen to be legislating all the time. But as I say, if something needs to be done, I think the majority in the House is available to do it.
You have total belief that it's legally watertight, because that's what the rumours are, isn't it? That there's some sort of wrangling that could take place here.
There's always a possibility of wrangling. I think it's legally watertight. We've identified the possible areas where it might be circumvented, and we think those are rather far-fetched. But if we thought it was necessary to do something about it, we would probably be in a position to do so. I think we have to bear in mind that one of the tactics coming out from number 10 does seem to be to spread disinformation. And we've seen it with the episode over the weekend, which shameful, quite frankly.
Perhaps I'll just ask you straight up, are you colluding with a foreign power?
I'm not colluding with any foreign power. This is complete fantasy. And the idea that I'm being funded by foreign governments or foreign entities is even more of a fantasy. And the most extraordinary fantasy of the lot was the claim that we could be investigated by number 10 Downing Street for doing this, which is also rubbish, because they don't have the power to do it in any event. And yet that set a hair running because it was picked up by the Mail on Sunday, which led directly to death threats. And this is extraordinary behaviour, and I will be taking that up with the Cabinet Secretary. He is responsible for propriety in government, and I've never seen something done like that.
Just to be clear, that's direct. You've had a death threat that's quoted, referenced that.
Absolutely referenced the article and the statement that the official in number 10 Downing Street had made.
And you've reported that to the police?
Yes.
So this week, obviously, Parliament is sitting, the Conservative Party conference goes on. Talk perhaps of a no-confidence motion being passed in the government. Indeed, actually, the government almost throwing down the gauntlet for it to be called. If there was to be one, how would you vote in it?
Firstly, if there's a call for a referendum, I will support a referendum. Of course I will. That must be absolutely clear about this. I support a referendum, and if there's an opportunity to vote for one, we need to show support for it. And I think
even if it meant collapsing a Conservative government?
Yes, but I don't think it would necessarily mean collapsing a Conservative government, although it might. But I think to conflate the two together may be an error. Ultimately, under the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, there are very specific ways in which a government can be collapsed. There are a couple of other alternatives, but actually just voting for a referendum in itself is not one of them. But clearly, if that were to happen and there was to be an expression by Parliament that it wanted a referendum, I would hope that Boris Johnson, as Prime Minister, would listen and be willing to deliver it. But if he can't deliver it or won't deliver it, then you do face the prospect of having to find somebody else who will do it. And as I was explaining to the meeting, that is when I think we come to the crunch in this. Because either we're going to end up with a general election late in the autumn, early December, a strange time of year to have one. That is a legitimate democratic event. But I fear unlikely to deliver any clarity on this at all, and indeed very likely that the outcome will be that you don't have a majority government led by anybody, in which case we're going to be talking about exactly the same topic in December as we are now. I think it would be much better to have a referendum and to go back to the public and offer them the choices available. And I would be prepared to do everything I can to bring that about. But I have to be realistic. That will require either a change by the government or putting in place some form of government of national unity to deliver that specific thing and have a general election afterwards.
Do you think we need to be talking about perhaps slightly broader electoral reform? If Parliament is now if general elections are returning so many hung parliaments, maybe we should look at changing the voting system, changing the voting age. What do you think?
I certainly think there's an argument that if the two-party system, as we have largely understood it, has come to an end, maintaining a first-past-the-post system is going to become untenable. I entirely accept that, and I'm favourable to change taking place. But the truth is that as long as we're mired in a political crisis, that is not going to come about. But I think we have to consider it. As for giving the vote to 16-year-olds, I am actually in favour of it. But again, you can't change that to influence, for example, the outcome of a forthcoming referendum. I think you've got to be realistic. If we're going to have a referendum, it will be on the existing electoral register.
Outside of within the tactics of a referendum, if you could just elaborate on why you support those votes for 16-year-olds, because I feel like that's actually a fairly minority position here at the Conservative Party conference.
I wonder if it is. Ultimately, there is something slightly arbitrary about the age you choose to give people the vote. When I started voting, it had only just come down to 18. Prior to that, it was 21. So I had the advantage of voting as an 18-year-old. My view is that my experience, particularly of going to sixth forms, is that 16-year-olds are pretty plugged in to what is going on, and I question a little bit whether they are significantly different from 18-year-olds in terms of their ability to make a judgment. In addition to that, we have to accept that we have allowed in Scotland the Scots to lower the voting age to 16. So we do actually have an example to go on, and it doesn't seem to have caused a significant issue. And I am very uncomfortable, actually, about having differential voting ages within the United Kingdom. And so having made that decision that we allowed this to happen in Scotland and gave the Scottish Parliament the right to lower the voting age, which they did, it makes me rather uncomfortable that the UK elections don't do the same thing. So on balance, I'm happy to vote for votes at 16.
It's almost a democratic deficit there. Dominic Grieve, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much. Thanks.